And then and that gets into the talent question, and so that gets into the approach to the portal. And I think this becomes another part coaching question and part Michigan. You brought up the Michigan side of things, which is legitimate, and we can speak more too about the NIL support for basketball. It's just not there. Let's call it what it is. On the flip side of it, when it comes to the portal approach, there were 3 years in a row where you had guys that portal guys that didn't make it in. The No Joe Eastern one, that's when you go after a guy and you don't really know the lay of the land as far as the credits won't transfer for upperclassmen. That was understandable. The Terrence Shannon thing happens where Terrence Shannon, he's ready to come and there are no allowances made. You can't get Texas Tech to let him finish there so he can be a grad. There's no workaround here at Michigan. He's not going to give up all those credits because he wants to transfer. I mean, he wants to graduate. You understand that, and it doesn't work. But then when you get to the Caleb Love piece, now it's happened twice before. Now it's like, okay, there has to be something in the approach when in the pool of players that we swim in that we can actually get. We can't get upperclassmen. We could get grads. And we get underclassmen. That to me is something that if I'm Ward and I'm sitting down with Juwan, I want to give you this extra year. Yeah. Tell me how this strategy from the portal is really going to work. Now, the flip side of it, to your point, is if I'm Juwan, I'm looking back at Ward and I'm saying, okay, man, I got Ray J. Dennis. We talk about all these other dudes, Daniel. We haven't talked about Ray J. You see what Ray J doing over down at Baylor?
Hey, man. In work.
in work. He's putting in work at Baylor. And Ray J. Dennis is a grad or was a grad transfer. And Ray J. Dennis was right down the road at Toledo. And he's right now, I think he's shooting 50% from the field. He's shooting 40% from three. He's averaging 14 points a game on a squad in the best league in the country. Yep. So he's not doing it against bums. Like that dude, if you got him, that's better than Caleb Love.
Yep.
If you get him,
having both of them.
Right. Well, hell, just give me one. If I got to choose one, I'm choosing him.
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
That dude, I have no put it this way. I believe. I cannot say definitively because I don't have tangible proof. But I believe they lost that one for NIL.
Yeah.
Daniel. And so that's the guy, whether it's Ray J. Dennis or Hunter Dickinson, that's a guy, man, where if you're going to have a basketball program that competes moving forward, you got to be able to keep a Hunter Dickinson.
Yep.
And you got to be able to get a Ray J. Dennis from Toledo. Like, come on, man. If you can't do that, then you aren't going to be able to compete at the level that Michigan basketball is used to competing at.
Sam, just look at what that roster would be. Let's keep out the guys who went pro, right? Because you can't really stop if they tell a guy he's going to be a first-round pick or lottery or close to lottery. You can't really keep him in school at this point in the game, right? But with those two guys that you just mentioned, Dennis and Love replacing Bufkin and Jet, right? And Hunter stays. You have Terrence Shannon who might have gotten to school last year. Man, you have a totally different roster,
See,
right?
But I don't think we can do the what if with Caleb and Terrence. They're not getting in. There's no future where those guys get in.
Okay, and in those situations, you have to. And I've heard people ask, "Well, how don't you know you can't get those guys in?" It's one of those situations where you recruit the guy and they commit first, then you go through the admissions process where the school reviews their transcripts. So it's not like when you transfer high schools or something that you send your transcripts first, and it's different. It's kind of works differently with this situation. So it's one of those situations where then you realize you don't get a guy. Now it's late in the cycle. All the really good guys are gone already. So you're in a tough position.
But I think this is when it's a little easier to put because we're not talking about being accepted, being admitted. Yeah. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about these guys once you get past a certain threshold, their credits won't transfer
Yes.
anymore. So
Yeah, sure.
you might be, you got senior credits, you got to chop off. I know when for instance, Ole Miss, when Shea Patterson transferred from Ole Miss, I think he lost between 20 and 30 credits in transfer. And there aren't a lot of guys that are going to do that. Terrence Shannon wasn't going to do that. Right? So it's that's not a pool of players that you can really swim in. This is a pivot that football has made.
Yes.
Where they don't very rare circumstances, like a what's my man's name? The big offensive tackle. The big Hinton. Miles Hinton from Stanford. Right? You know, even he has some that wind up getting lost, but you're going from Stanford to Michigan. Right? So it's very rare circumstances you might be able to do something like that, but you can't live in that. You can't live in that pool of players.
Right.
It's got to be underclassmen and grad transfers.
Yeah.
And that to me is part of the discussion that if you're a man, you have with Juwan. Now that doesn't mean that Juwan don't come right back and say, Ray J. Dennis wore it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Hey man, I had a grad. Like, okay, so what about that? What about Hunter? Kind of thing. So I think both sides have some legitimate things to say here. Yeah. To try to get it right, but one guy is in control of whether the other guy has a job. Right. So ultimately, it's Juwan has to answer the award. And it's like, okay, so what are we going to do with this portal approach? I think that's a very real conversation to be having.
Yeah, I think the portal approach as well as the NIL thing has to be figured out. And I think we all know Michigan will never be able to. And we talk about this as coaches, right? I have friends that coach at the mid-major level, and we talk about this. They're able to expedite their rebuilds sometimes with JUCO players as well. And there's some really good players at JUCO that are really good students and come into the D1 and Power 5 level and do what you see there at other schools in the Big Ten that have kind of built their programs supplement their program with JUCO players. So it's one of those things where Juwan has well, I won't say Juwan because if Juwan leaves and they bring in a new coach, the new coach have to deal with the same issues, right? You have a limited amount of players that you have to choose from as far as your recruiting resources, recruiting pool, and you have limited resources to go and get those guys. So until something changes on that front, I don't know. It matters if we change the coach or not. We're going to be watching a lot of mediocre basketball for a while.